Chapter 19. The Mirror. Hoggie couldn't have slept more than 2 hours. When she woke up, the sun was still rising. The faint noise of the helicopters and fire engines told her that London was as much in confusion as the night before. Although one still couldn't see what exactly was happening, as dense fog was now hanging over the water. The children hadn't eaten much the previous day, and now they were positively starving. Hoggie ventured back into her flooded apartment, and salvaged enough food scraps to make them sandwiches. The friends then sat at the top of the stairs, and had their breakfast.
"It doesn't look like anyone will be coming to rescue us,"
Hoggie noted, through a mouthful of bread and marmite.
"Not today, in any case. We'll have to rescue ourselves, Scooter."
Scooter nodded his agreement.
"We could build a raft out of the top of your kitchen table and some old crates. We're not that far away from dry land. The only thing that worries me is those sharks."
For all the fog, they could not see the sharks, but Hoggie too was certain that they were still out there. She thought she could hear them now and then, flapping their powerful tails. Hoggie stopped chewing for a moment and listened to the calm, crisp air around her. Splash, 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 she heard. There was a certain rhythm to all this flapping, as if the sharks weren't just sneaking around at random, but rather were making laps in a swimming pool. Suddenly, Hoggie saw something glisten in the fog.
"Did you see that?"
The splashing was becoming louder and louder, as something large moved down the flooded street towards them. Both worried and hopeful, the children peered into the mist. Another moment passed, and out of the fog there emerged a gilded gondola, at whose high stern, a pole in his hand, Prospero was standing.
"Prospero!"
Hoggie and Scooter yelled at once, running down the stairs. Prospero jumped off the gondola, and grabbed the children into his long, strong arms.
"Am I glad to see you? Is everybody all right?"
"We're fine,"
Hoggie assured him.
"How are things at Peducci's?"
"As good as they can be."
"You didn't get flooded?"
"Not at all. But I knew you would be. So first thing this morning, I grabbed one of the gondolas and went to fetch you."
"Did you see the sharks?"
Scooter asked.
"I did."
Prospero glanced back into the fog.
"Isn't it the weirdest thing?"
He tied the gondola to a lamp-post in front of the apartment building, and said,
"Well, let's find your things and get you out of here. Where is your aunt, Hoggie?"
Hoggie lowered her eyes. She could lie to Mrs. Gullitch, but not to Aunt Michelle's boyfriend.
"You better sit down, Prospero,"
she said. 10 minutes later, Prospero knew everything that happened to the children in the last 3 months, from the day they had met Dr. Barnaby in the city library, to the moment Hoggie received a phone call from Aunt Michelle's kidnappers. The only things Hoggie had left out were some of the stranger books in Alexander Libri's secret collection, as well as her thoughts about what the mirror was, and what it could do. She figured that most grown-ups would not believe it anyway. The more Hoggie talked, the more concerned Prospero grew. For a few minutes after her story ended, he remained quiet, mulling it over. At last he said,
"So, you have no idea whatsoever where this book is?"
Hoggie shook her head.
"Well," Prospero said, "in this case, we have to go to the police."
Hoggie had to agree that it was their only choice. Personally, she loathed and feared the idea of talking to the police. If she did, not only would she have to spend countless hours trying to explain to some strangers things which absolutely could not be explained, and lose for ever access to the world's most extraordinary book collection, but, given her record, and the fact that a person died in the course of their quest for the mirror, she might even end up in an institution for young criminals. But right now she was more worried about what was going to happen to Aunt Michelle. As they made their way through London, the rising sun slowly burning away the fog, they encountered hundreds of people escaping the flooded city, in boats, on rickety rafts made of scraps of wood and plastic, and even on inflatable mattresses. To avoid traffic jams, Prospero steered the gondola off the main street. The company travelled for another 100 metres before they heard, "Help! Somebody help!" They looked around. There wasn't a single person on the street, and the windows of the nearby buildings were empty. Just then, the same voice announced, "Up here!" Prospero and the children tilted their heads backward, and saw, right above them, in the crown of a tall elm tree, a man. The man's jacket was caught on the tree's branches, and he was trying, unsuccessfully, to free himself by waving his arms and jerking his legs. Another man, unconscious and motionless, was hanging a little higher. Trapped in the net of fine twigs, he resembled a dead fly in a spider's web. Prospero climbed the elm, and helped both men down. Once they were in the boat, Hoggie and Scooter noticed their police uniforms.
"How did you end up in the tree?"
Prospero asked. The first policeman, the one who had been crying for help, rubbed the scratches on his hands and neck.
"We were making rounds," he explained, "in a motor-boat, and then suddenly we ran into something. The next thing I know, I'm flying through the air and landing in this tree."
Hoggie looked around, and quickly spotted the policeman's up-sided motor-boat on the roof of one of the nearby houses. Just then, the second policeman came around. For a few seconds, he stared at the people around him, and then said, "Where is it?"
"Where is what?"
The policeman stared back at them as if they were stupid.
"The crocodile."
Prospero and the other policeman exchanged glances.
"Jack, I think you hit your head on that tree," the other policeman remarked. "I am fine," Jack retorted. "I'm telling you, Robbie, it was a crocodile we hit."
"Are you sure it wasn't just some rubbish?"
"I think I can tell a difference between a crocodile and a pile of rubbish," Jack replied defensively. "It was a croc, and a huge one too, 12 metres or longer."
"Jack," Robbie said, "you are delusional. We are not in Africa. We're not in Australia. There are no crocodiles around here."
"Maybe one escaped from the zoo," Jack persisted.
"Well, if it did, we would be the first ones to know, wouldn't we?"
Robbie noted reasonably.
"Besides, whoever heard of a 12-metre-long crocodile? You must have imagined it."
"Sarcosuchus imperator was about that size,"
Scooter whispered to Hoggie. Hoggie did not know what the chances of a super-croc surviving into the modern days were, but she would not write Jack's story off quite as easily. She remembered only too well the strange and horrifying encounter she and Scooter had had in the London catacombs just the day before.
"Anyway," Robbie said in the meantime, "let's go see if we can fix the boat. Can you take us to that house?" he asked Prospero.
"Certainly," the acrobat replied. "But before I do, I'd like to report a crime."
"Join the queue."
The policeman let out a mirthless laughter.
"This whole city is one big crime scene. Looters, burglars, fools, on top of which we have several million people trapped in their houses. So as soon as the motor-boat is running again, Jack and I are off to take care of them. So, I'm sorry, sir, but whatever it is, it'll have to wait."
"Is there anybody who can help us?"
Prospero asked, as he dropped the two men by their boat.
"Try the police station in Tufnell Park," Robbie suggested. "But if I were you, I wouldn't bother. They only have 2 officers there. Everyone else is on search and rescue duty."
"This is a disgrace,"
Prospero complained, as the gondola started down the flooded street again.
"If you can't count on the police to help you catch kidnappers, who can you count on?"
"I don't think those 2 would be much help to us anyway,"
Hoggie remarked. Scooter agreed. They travelled in silence for a while, each pondering the same. What will they do if they can't get help? Suddenly, they heard ever-growing noise, and, a minute later, a huge helicopter flew above them, making the trees sway and the water ripple.
"Reporters," Scooter noted scornfully. "They must be glad to have something to report finally."
Prospero studied the aircraft and shook his head.
"This is not a TV helicopter, and it isn't the police either. It's the Air Force."
"Whatever are they doing here?"
"Something must have happened." Something indeed must have happened, because no sooner had the company reached the end of the block than another Air Force helicopter flew by, and then another one.
"They're going to the BT Tower," Scooter guessed suddenly. "Let's follow them."
As the company approached the tower, the sounds of the helicopter engines indeed grew louder. At the same time, the streets were becoming more and more forsaken. Not a single person peered out of a window, or sat on a roof waiting to be rescued. Even pigeons and seagulls were nowhere to be seen. Hoggie was still wondering about this interesting fact, when the gondola turned the corner, and the company found itself in Conway Street, the BT Tower, London's tallest building, blocking the sky in front of them. The street and all of Fitzrovia appeared completely deserted. The only people around were Hoggie and her friends, and the crews of the 4 Air Force helicopters that were circling the tower.
"What are they doing there?"
Hoggie wondered, shielding her eyes from the sunlight. There did not appear to be any sense in what the helicopter pilots were doing, but just then the top of the tower moved. Hoggie startled. Did she imagine it? But then again, her friends had seen it too. Prospero shifted his pole nervously, and Scooter gasped and grabbed Hoggie's arm. "Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat," they heard the next moment. It took Hoggie a few seconds to realize what it was. One of the helicopters was firing a machine gun. Next, they heard the sounds of glass shattering. "We have to get out of here," Scooter yelled, ducking and covering his head. But what happened next made Hoggie, Prospero, and Scooter freeze in their tracks. An enormous shape peeled off the tower's wall and screened the sky. Then, with a deafening roar, it swirled in the air, touching 3 of the helicopters with its tail, and sending them in all directions like a handful of flies. In the end, it landed on the tower's roof, and, with another equally thunderous roar, spread its wings, displaying before the company's disbelieving eyes an armour of glistening scales.
"Oh dear," Scooter whispered. "It looks like a dragon."
Just then, the 4th helicopter flew closer to the dragon, and it was, in fact, a dragon, and fired another round at it. The bullets bounced off the monster's chest, without leaving as much as a dent in the silvery scales. The dragon craned its neck and breathed fire onto its enemy. The helicopter caught on fire, and hastened to land on the roof of a nearby building. Prospero dropped his pole, and Scooter swallowed noisily. Just then, a sudden memory stirred in Hoggie's mind, surprising her and giving her hope.
"The dragon!"
she cried.
"I've seen it before."
"Where?"
"In the art class. Brick drew it."
Hoggie gasped as another sudden and equally surprising thought came to her.
"Brick has the mirror. He's using it as a sketchbook."
"I bet you're right,"
Scooter said. "He and Pickle must have broken into your locker to get back at you. This must be why the Air Force closed the airport. They saw the dragon stealing sheep from the local farmers, only it was so weird they didn't dare tell anyone about it."
"Ah," he realized the next moment.
"I think Jack actually did see the giant crocodile. Brick was in the science class when Miss Chakrabarty told us about Sarcosuchus imperator."
Scooter shook his head.
"I wonder what else he has drawn that we haven't seen yet."
Hoggie's stomach tightened. It would be quite dangerous to entrust the mirror to a wicked man with a wicked plan, but it would be just as dangerous to leave it in the hands of a person who had no idea as to what the book could do.
"Prospero,"
Hoggie cried.
"Quick! We have to go back. Brickenhoff's pawn shop."
Prospero had been growing more and more worried ever since he began to realize that not only there was something extremely odd going on, but that Hoggie and Scooter were somehow involved in it. "What is going on?" he demanded.
"We'll tell you on the way to the shop,"
Scooter promised, grabbing the second pole and turning the gondola around. And so, as they navigated back to Camden, the children filled in the gaps in their earlier story. They told Prospero about Alexander Libri's unusual collection, about the mirror, and about what they thought it could do. To their surprise, Prospero believed them. Scooter suspected that seeing a fire-breathing dragon went a long way towards convincing the young man. Rising out of the water, Jonathan Brickenhoff's pawn-shop, with its grey walls and a layer of armour, looked like a docked submarine. As the gondola came near the building, Scooter banged on the iron-plated door.
"Mr. Brickenhoff!" he shouted. "Brick! Are you there?"
No one answered.
"They must have left," Scooter noted. "What are we going to do now?"
"We should get inside anyway,"
Hoggie said,
"in case Brick left the book behind."
Prospero climbed up the rain-pipe, to see if any of the windows on the second floor could be opened from outside, but discovered only that they were securely barred. But then, they noticed that the shop's front door wasn't locked.
"That's not like Mr. Brickenhoff,"
Hoggie remarked. The company anchored the gondola and went inside. Dusky and stale, the insides of the pawn-shop resembled a secret pirate cove. The similarity was even greater, because of the masses of gold and silver items glistening inside the glass counters, just inches above the water. Jonathan Brickenhoff and his son must have been in a real hurry if they left this treasure behind. Waist-deep in the water, the company waded to the back of the shop, where one set of stairs led up to the second floor, and another down to the cellar. Just at the top of the downward staircase, on a dusty wall above the railing, was a large crimson stain, shaped like a smudged handprint.
"Is that blood?"
Scooter asked, his voice faltering. Prospero went back into the shop, and found a golf club and a lamp. He must have been gone just a couple of minutes, but to Hoggie and Scooter they felt like forever. At last he reappeared.
"There is no one on the ground floor," he announced. "Something is odd about this place, though. There are mountains of soil in the back room, and empty sacks, and digging tools."
The company ascended to the second floor, and found themselves at the end of a long and narrow corridor, with half a dozen doors along it. They opened them one after another, and peeped inside. The room closest to the stairs must have been Jonathan Brickenhoff's bedroom. It was untidy, and reeking of cigarette smoke. 2 more rooms might have been spare bedrooms at some point, but now served as storage. They were filled with boxes and crates and old furniture. One of the doors led to the bathroom, and one to a small closet. The 6th door at the very end of the corridor was locked.
"This must be Brick's room,"
Hoggie said, shaking the doorknob vigorously.
"How do we get in?"
Prospero squatted by the door and examined the lock.
"We'll have to break it,"
he announced.
"Scooter, fetch us one of those old chairs from the storage, will you?"
Scooter brought the chair, and Prospero was just about to smash the doorknob with it, when the company heard a thump.
"What was that?"
Scooter whispered. Without a single word, Prospero raised his index finger, indicating that the sound had come from the attic. For a few moments the company remained motionless. The house was perfectly quiet. Then, just as everyone was beginning to think that it was a draught, or the sound of the old house settling, they heard another loud thump, followed by an equally loud sound of several feet stomping down the floorboards. This new sound was so unexpected and so eerie that all 3 shuddered. And just then, to add to their apprehension even more, the door at the end of the corridor opened with a long and ominous squeak. From behind the door, a pair of eyes, suspicious and frightened, stared at the company. For an instant, the eyes glistened with recognition and relief, but already the next moment they looked scared again.
"Come in, quickly!"
An arm outstretched from behind the door grabbed Scooter and dragged him into the room. Hoggie and Prospero followed in, coming face to face with the terrified Brick. As soon as everyone was inside, Brick shut the door and locked it. "Shh!" he whispered.
"Be very quiet, or it'll know you're here." "Who?"
Hoggy asked, also in a whisper.
"It,"
was Brick's only answer. Brick's room was even messier than his father's. Brick himself was a mess, his hair uncombed and unwashed for days, his clothes stained and wrinkled.
"Brick, do you have the book?"
Hoggy asked. For a second she was worried that it wasn't Brick who had taken the mirror, that their journey was in vain, and that they would have to start their search all over again. But it was Brick, and he knew exactly what book she was talking about. The boy crossed the room to his bed, pulled the mirror from under the mattress, and carefully, as if it were a bomb, handed it to Hoggy.
"Do you know what it does?"
Hoggy couldn't help asking. Brick nodded.
"How long have you known?"
"For a couple of days."
Brick sounded tired and miserable. Hoggy opened the mirror, and both she and Scooter felt suddenly dizzy. On the book's very first page, there was a cityscape of London, with the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, the BT Tower, and the London Eye. But all around the city there was a tropical swamp, complete with monsoon, flowering trees, parrots and monkeys hanging from the vines. On the edge of a swamp was a giant crocodile, wrestling a double-decker. Hoggy turned to the next page, and saw a picture of a chimpanzee, grinning meanly and shaking his fist. The chimp was dressed in a denim jacket and a baseball cap. The animal's face was a lot like that of a human, and it seemed very familiar. The realization came to Hoggy in a flash.
"Brick,"
she asked,
"is this Pickle?"
Brick nodded. The next 2 pages of the book contained the images of sharks circling around in the fountain on Trafalgar Square, and, of course, the dragon.
"How come you are here all alone?" Prospero asked. "Where is your father?"
"I haven't seen him in days,"
Brick explained.
"He went out Monday afternoon, and told me not to leave the shop until he was back. But he never came back, or called. I've been waiting and waiting, and then that thing trapped me in here."
"What thing?" Scooter asked. Brick turned the mirror to the next page. Hoggy gasped. Filling the entire page, there was an image of a frightening and bizarre creature. A giant tree, with several human arms, and just as many human feet. It was faceless, but even then one could see how angry and mean it was.
"It's Humbaba,"
Hoggy explained for the benefit of her friends.
"from the Mesopotamian myths."
"Brick, are you saying this thing is still in the house?"
Scooter asked, feeling suddenly very weak. Brick nodded.
"It doesn't look like it is, but it is here, and every time I try to get out it springs on me. Last time it almost got me."
As proof, he lifted his shirt, and showed them long and deep scratches on both of his sides. Hoggy leafed through the 2 or 3 pages that followed the image of Humbaba. They all contained pictures of apples, bananas, and chocolate bars. Brick, trapped in his room, must have been drawing his own food to keep himself alive.
"I tried raising him,"
Brick professed, sinking down on his messy bed and propping his dishevelled head with both hands,
"but it didn't work."
There were indeed smudges and scratch marks all over the portrait of Humbaba.
"Whatever this book does, it can't be undone."
"Oh,"
Brick sighed, bowing his head even lower.
"I am such an idiot. I've created a monster. And this too."
He gestured towards the window outside which London was standing in 2 meters of water.
"All the people I've put out of their homes. When my father finds out, I'm grounded for life," he concluded grimly.
Hoggy sat down next to Brick.
"You're being too hard on yourself, Charlie."
At the sound of his name, his real name, that hardly anybody ever used these days, Brick looked up.
Your father's not going to find out. Nobody is going to find out, because we're not going to tell anybody,"
Hoggie assured the boy.
"You won't?"
Hoggie, Scooter, and Prospero nodded.
"Nobody would believe us anyway,"
Scooter remarked.
"I'm sure that things will work out eventually,"
Hoggie further comforted Brick.
"After all, it is not the first time London is flooded."
"Yeah,"
Scooter joined her.
"How are you to know what this book could do? You didn't do anything wrong. Well, apart from taking Hoggie's stuff without asking her."
Brick blushed.
"That I did. Well, actually, it was Pickle's idea, but it was I who broke into your locker. I'm so sorry."
Hoggie patted him on the shoulder.
"I know you are, Charlie."
Just then, Prospero glanced at his wrist-watch and said, "Hoggie, Scooter, it is getting late. We must hurry to the library." But it occurred to Scooter, some time earlier, that they no longer had to give the mirror to the kidnappers.
"When the kidnappers ordered you to bring the book to the library, they were hoping you did not know what it could do," he explained to Hoggie. "But we do know now, and we can use the mirror to rescue Aunt Michelle."
Hoggie considered this for a few moments. Frankly, she was afraid of the book. What if its magic wasn't as straightforward as Scooter was saying it was? She thought of the bronze lion smashing a car, and the Rosamunda landing atop someone's house. She didn't want her wish to backfire at her or other people. But still, the temptation to solve her problems right there and then was too great. She sat down at the table in the corner of the room, and laid the mirror out in front of her. Then, for several minutes, Hoggie thought about how she should phrase her wish. At last she came up with the words which, she was fairly certain, could not hurt anybody. She took Brick's pen and wrote,
"I want Aunt Michelle to be safe and free again."
She stared at the words for a few moments. Nothing happened.
"I don't think it works,"
she pronounced. It occurred to her suddenly that the mirror's magic did not always happen instantly, simply because some things had a tendency to develop slowly. Brick's swamp, for instance, did not happen until after several days of heavy rain. It was also possible, however, that her wish had already been granted. She just didn't know about it yet.
"How can we make sure that Aunt Michelle is free?"
Hoggie wondered. The telephones still weren't working, and even if they did, where would they call? Certainly not St. Clair's Lane. Their flooded apartment wasn't at all a safe place. Where else, then? Aunt Michelle could be anywhere. Or she could still be in her prison, waiting for the mirror's magic to work its way through her bonds. They had absolutely no way of knowing. Meanwhile, Hoggie's time was running out.
"What do you think?"
Scooter asked her.
"I think we should go to the library,"
Hoggie decided.
"I can't miss the meeting, in case the kidnappers still have Aunt Michelle. I'll haggle with them. I'll demand to see Aunt Michelle, or just talk to her. That way I can hold on to the book for a while longer, and maybe by then we'll hear from Aunt Michelle."
Prospero nodded his approval. "You better come with us, Charlie," he said to Brick. "You can stay at Paducci's until we find your father." Before opening the bedroom's door, Prospero listened to the world outside for a few seconds. The house was quiet. Very slowly, the acrobat opened the door, surveyed the empty corridor, and, without a single word, gestured the children to get out. Single file, with Prospero, the golf-club in his hand, in rear-guard, they tiptoed towards the stairs, casting fearful glances towards the ceiling. But no sound ever came from the attic. Perhaps Humbaba had become tired of patrolling the dreary pawn-shop, and left. At last Scooter, who was leading the way, reached the stairs. He set his foot on the first step, and the old wood squeaked. Immediately the door of the storage-room flung open, and out of the darkness there emerged the horrific form of Humbaba, its many arms outstretching towards the children. The children screamed. One of the arms got hold of Brick's jacket, and began to pull the screaming and kicking boy towards Humbaba's tree-trunk-like torso, At the same time, a dark and abysmal gap the size of the boy opened in the torso. Hoggie grabbed Brick's hands, and was holding on to him, but it was just her two skinny arms against the monster's several limbs. She felt her feet slipping on the floor. Prospero hit Humbaba with the golf club, but before he could mete out a second blow, two of the creature's arms grabbed the club and broke it in half as if it were a matchstick.
"Scooter!"
Hoggie yelled. Scooter ran back, and, too, grabbed hold of Brick. That slowed Brick's terrifying and, no doubt, deadly journey towards the gap, just long enough for Prospero to open the door of another storage room and grab a chair. With a growl, the acrobat rammed Humbaba with the chair, pushing it back into the storage. The creature let go of Brick. "Run!" Prospero roared. The children darted down the corridor, down the stairs, and out of the shop, while Prospero, in 3 swift moves, shoved Humbaba into the storage, shut the door, and stuck the chair's leg into the door handle. Then, in a mere 6 long strides, and a single leap over the shop's counter, he too was out of the house. By then the children had already pulled out the anchor. Hurriedly, the company steered away from the haunted pawnshop.
"I think we'll be all right now," Scooter said, some 5 blocks later. He had been glancing back every 2 seconds, but so far had not seen any sign of pursuit. Hoggie, Brick, and Prospero did not reply. They were still trying to recover their breath after the ghastly encounter. Prospero had taken the course for the library. As Hoggie sat at the bow, watching the statue of Saint Jerome grow bigger and sharper against the afternoon sky, she wondered if they were doing the right thing. Now that she knew just how dangerous the mirror could be, she was afraid of giving such a powerful magical thing to the evil man or men who had kidnapped her aunt, and, most likely, murdered Dr. Barnaby. But she didn't really have a choice. Or did she?